The House Oversight Committee is obtaining more documents regarding Jeffrey Epstein, but not from the Department of Justice, but they are receiving them from other places. And so the ranking member of that committee is Robert Garcia. He has been a fierce advocate for these women and the truth. And here's something that he said, I think it's worth us all hearing. There are fighters out there in the Democratic Party.
I'm going to be his worst nightmare, and the committee is going to hold him accountable every single day. We're not going to allow one of his crimes, his illegal actions, those of his administration, whether it's Pam Bondi, whether it's Stephen Miller. These are folks that have caused massive harm to the public, that are violating the Constitution, that are denying people's due process rights. And Donald Trump has to be held accountable for what he's done to this country. And this idea that we're going to just forget about it or pass it along as it's some sort of dark moment in history, we have to be very clear to the next generation that this is not how government should operate, and this is not how a president should act.
I love that. That gave me a little bit of inspiration. And he also, as ranking member, started releasing photos from Epstein. There were photos, there were videos. So I just want to play some of those. This is apparently some kind of bathroom or steam room in the Epstein house. And then you have a bedroom. And he had this whole island in the Virgin Islands. They called it Little Jeff Island. And he would take women. I think this photo is interesting. It shows written on the chalkboard, power, deception, plates, music. I just found it interesting that power and deception were on those. And then they've redacted some things. This slide is interesting. Apparently one of Jeffrey Epstein's former girlfriends was a dentist. So they had a full-blown dental office in here. And there's masks, men's masks, all on the wall. I was just totally fucking creeped out by this. Were you? Did you?
Yeah, I was. And I saw that our friend Ruth Ben-Ghiat, the professor on authoritarianism, had commented about this, that Gaddafi, he was a dictator, and he used human slaves, sex slaves, and had a compound of trafficked people. And he had the same type of thing, medical rooms set up, dental rooms set up, OBGYN rooms set up in his compound. So this is not that as uncommon and horrific it is for us, knowing that there is, like, with authoritarians, there's a play. And then with these human sex traffickers, they end up having these, medical rooms. It's so disturbing. And I think it's important as I look at all of these videos, when I think about me being a young girl, 14, 15 years old, you're so young. You think you might be kind of big, but you're just such a kid. And that Jeffrey Epstein and the people whom he hung out with had an appetite for sexual relations, mainly rape, with these children. And that the president of the United States, after Jeffrey Epstein was convicted, had him to the White House in 2017 for Thanksgiving dinner. And then when you think about the connections to Putin, and you think about the connections to Netanyahu and the Israeli government, and you think about the unanswered question as to how this man, Jeffrey Epstein, had this much wealth, and that's still not really been described accurately. And then you ask everybody who knew him, who was involved in this case, do you think he committed suicide? And people on the right, on the left, top, bottom, across the board say, no, they don't think he did. So I commend Robert Garcia for his tenacity and his pursuit of justice, because there is a lot obviously here. I am somewhat angry again at the Biden administration that this was not exposed, released, etc., under a DOJ that could be somewhat trustworthy, because God knows they weren't aggressive under Merrick Garland's. But now that Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and Dan Bongino are scrubbing the shit out of all these files. And when I see those images and I think about little girls being there and getting sat in that dental chair, having God knows what done to her with those masks, how horrifying, how terrifying that must be.
Well, and you think about Ghislaine Maxwell was the chief recruiter. She went after these girls. These were not girls in stable home life situations. These were girls that were profoundly poor, profoundly unstable home environments where $250 for a massage was more than their parents made working. These are very impoverished girls that they victimized. So many were victimized prior to meeting Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. And then here's a video that kind of shows the layout of this mansion on Little Jeffrey.
Democrats on the Oversight Committee released new images and videos from a private island in the Caribbean once owned by Jeffrey Epstein. The new images show bedrooms, a room featuring what appears to be a dentist chair with masks on the walls, and a blackboard with words written on it, such as power and deception. Multiple videos captured the opulent grounds featuring a swimming pool, palm trees, and a winding path overlooking the ocean. One of the images shows a landline phone with the names Darren, Rich, Mike, Patrick, and Larry written on the speed dial buttons. A Democratic committee aide told CNN the committee redacted names of women from the images and videos out of an abundance of caution. Representative Robert Garcia said in a statement, quote, "These new images are a disturbing look into the world of Jeffrey Epstein and his island. We are releasing these photos and videos to ensure public transparency in our investigation and to help piece together the full picture of Epstein's horrific crime." The release comes after President Trump signed a bill directing the Justice Department to publicly release all Epstein-related records.
Here's the thing. Okay, Kylie, there's a picture from the inside of the island looking out onto the shore. If you'll pop that up. Okay, so I've read a lot from the victims of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. And one thing I read over and over is girls on this island that were abused. They would run to the end of the island. They would run to the beach and they would think, how can I get off? What can I do to save myself from this? And I saw this and I thought they were so isolated. There was no one to get them any hope. And so many of them describe being on that beach and crying and feeling helpless. And I just thought, it gave me chills when I first saw it because they couldn't get away from this. They took them to an island where there were no laws, where Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were the law. They could physically not remove themselves. And I think about these women that have been traumatized their entire lives. And we've got the government and the president of the United States pussyfooting around all this and minimizing it. It is so disgusting. And something that you alluded to that I'm really looking to dig into is the Oversight Committee has received documents from like Deutsche Bank, Chase Bank about the ties to Jeffrey Epstein, how we got here. And they said they're going to be releasing that over the course of the next few days. And it says the Oversight Committee has received files related to Jeffrey Epstein from JP Morgan, Deutsche Bank, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. The Oversight Committee intends to release those in the next few days ahead. And I think that will give us an insight who's spending money, who's quote unquote, quote, being blackmailed by Jeffrey Epstein. I think the financial documents are going to lead to a lot of answers, I hope.
Yes, I think so too. And I do think that this is something that is going to be interesting as it moves forward because it's very bipartisan. And there's not that much bipartisanship in the United States anymore. There is bipartisanship about giving Benjamin Netanyahu a blank check. All of MAGA is for that. And then you have the Democratic leadership that is for that. And then you have this. And it started off as a promise and a cult, QAnon cult. And at the epicenter of the QAnon cult was this Jeffrey Epstein issue. And, then it turned into Pizzagate and other things. But the impetus for it is elites sexually abusing and raping children in a network of pedophiles. And so it started with Jeffrey Epstein. And it got a lot of traction in the MAGA world. And now that is transferred to where everybody now wants to know. And so the bipartisanship demand for justice on this issue is not going to go anywhere. And you're at the epicenter. You see politicians like Moses Mike Grinder Johnson, who talks so much about family values, Christianity, and God saying, "Wake up, buddy! You're Moses. We need for you to lead the United States." He is a pedophile protector. He is a guardian of pedophiles, and I want to know what Putin has on Trump, because I believe Jeffrey Epstein gave it to him, and there's been enough breadcrumbs to prove that. And I want to know what the Israelis have on Trump and other potentially Democratic leaders, because it's obvious in both of those regards, where you have these murderous fascists, Netanyahu and Putin, and then you have people that just bend the knee to them in positions of power. I mean, I'm not a foreign policy expert, but it appears like, do they have compromising information on these people? And it seems like, yeah, they must, if they're willing to throw American national security down the toilet. So it's really fascinating. And kudos to Robert Garcia. I think, listener, we're going to have him on next week. But thank you, Pumps, for highlighting that about those girls and on that island, because when you think about how beautiful, how fun when you first arrive, right, you would think, oh, wow, I'm in the Caribbean, I'm on this island. And then the horrors that these rapists and that Ghislaine Maxwell, who MAGA continues to coddle and excuse. It's really horrific. So I think that's all we have for this episode. Make sure you buy our book. It's a great way to support Pumps and me. Life is a Lazy Susan of Shit Sandwiches. Subscribe. A lot of you watch our videos but have not subscribed. Make sure you've subscribed, and we'll be back later with more news.